The Base Creates is a new production company founded by Oliver Bennett and Morgan Watkins. Our mission is to rediscover, explore and reinvigorate great texts in the Western canon to challenge the conformity of the contemporary dramatic arts. In a series of rehearsed readings, we've brought to life great texts with responses from new and interesting thinkers. And moving forward, we want to inspire new writers, fostering a movement of fearless creatives and exciting intellectuals. We believe drama needs to go deeper and challenge audiences in order to do justice to our fascinating and troubling modern world.
We hold regular rehearsed readings of great texts from the Western canon, and we follow these by a response from an interesting, unorthodox thinker, writer, or a philosopher. And then we have a group discussion. We've brought together some amazing actors, and so far we have done performances of Prometheus Bound by Aeschylus with a response from Esme Partridge. We did Goethe's Faust, Part 1, with a response from Sebastian Milbank. And we have recently done Vladimir Mayakovsky's Soviet play The Bedbug, with a response from Zinovy Zinnik. And in December of 2023, we did Sartre's No Exit, with a response from Nina Power, the incredible philosopher who is joining us today.
Her books include One Dimensional Woman and What Do Men Want? And she is one of the editors of Compact magazine. Thank you for joining us, Nina.
Thank you for having me.
Obviously want to talk to you about No Exit by Sartre and some of the background to it, the philosophical background to it, like, where this play comes from philosophically, and obviously it comes out of existentialism. So can you give us a kind of basic introduction to existentialism? Like, what is it? What is it reacting to? What is it proposing?
Yeah, so I think one of the things that's important to remember about existentialism is when it occurs, which is basically during the Second World War and thereafter. We have a kind of stereotypical cliched image of the philosopher smoking a cigarette and drinking wine in Paris, maybe wearing black, looking very profound. There's lots of very beautiful images of Sartre, even though he's not a very beautiful man. Camus and de Beauvoir and others. It's the first time, I think, that philosophy becomes almost like a kind of subculture. There's something kind of cool about it. There are existentialist plays and novels and massive philosophy books. So Being in Nothingness would be Sartre's major text from the 40s. No Exit is also written in the mid-40s, before the end of World War II. And I think there's something kind of claustrophobic about it. Like, it was very good to see your reading. It was in quite a small theatre, in the Tea House Theatre, which was kind of very perfect for this kind of very closed, claustrophobic image of a kind of hell, if you like. So even though Sartre is an atheist, because he thinks that relying on religion or God is a kind of cop-out, if you like, what he calls bad faith, because what is presented to us in our existence, and this is really where it comes from, is an absolute uncertainty, right? So we're kind of thrown into the world. We might inherit traditions, we might have kind of expectations from our society and our family, but ultimately, even if we decide to go with those, we're making that decision. So there is this kind of vertiginous experience of our own freedom. Sartre often puts it in a paradoxical way. He talks about the fact that we're condemned to be free. And I think this is very much the kind of atmosphere that's conjured up by No Exit, of a kind of what do we do? We find ourselves in this strange world with others who are baffling, perhaps, or attractive or confusing, but very other in their otherness. And we kind of have to cope with them. We have to cope with ourselves. We have to cope with our own lack, the fact that we don't know what we want, and even if we did, we can't get it. And then there's this world which just kind of appears to us. Sartre is drawing a lot on phenomenology, which is a kind of development after Kant, which is simply thinking about the way in which the world appears to us. So not asking the question about what the world is like in itself, but rather saying, how does the world appear to us as the kind of creatures or the kind of beings that we are. And Sartre and others will make this great distinction between the fact that we seem to be beings for ourselves, in the sense that we're kind of, our consciousness is empty and we're constantly trying to fill it. We have desires, we have needs, we have thoughts, and things that are in themselves. So when we look at objects, they seem kind of complete. Like the chair seems like it is what it is. Like the chair simply is there. We are in the world in a very different way, Sartre says. Sartre has this beautifully poetic description. He says, nothingness lies coiled like a worm at the heart of being, right? So there is something kind of empty about us. We're not complete. We're never finished. We're always in this process of becoming. And we're always sort of reaching for the next thing, whether it's our physical desire, sexual desire, romantic desire, our projects, the fact that we create meaning through taking on or creating projects, and so on. So existentialism, I would just to say, it seems very appropriate for the time. You have this kind of absolute desolation after 2 world wars, or you're coming to the end of the Second World War, not that people knew that when it was going to end. You have, if you like, modernity and the Enlightenment reaching a kind of horrific apex in the form of mass slaughter. You have millions of dead, seemingly for absolutely no reason. News of the kind of Holocaust and camps is coming out. You have this kind of absolute nihilism, really, a kind of bleakness. How can there be a God? How can there be a God that allows this to happen? How are we going to cope? All of the promise of man's great genius, all of the technology, all of the machinery, all of the solutions to the problems of nature have turned out to be a kind of charnel house, a slaughterhouse. So you can completely understand this sort of desolation, this collective cultural, social, political, religious desolation. And I think it's this this point at which Sartre and the others start to think again about what life could possibly mean in the face of this abject meaninglessness.
So what is the solution that they come to in the face of that meaninglessness? As I understand it, it's the burden is kind of all on the individual to make their own meaning, to make their own choices, and to like decide what meaning they want in the world. Is that, broadly speaking, right?
Yeah, I think so. So basically, it's like if all of the old securities, the worldviews, religious or philosophical, can no longer be kind of trusted, there's no sort of faith in progress or the future anymore because look where it got us. Then what do we have left, right? We have our immediate experience of the world. We have our experience of our own consciousness, which doesn't know what it wants. We know perhaps that we're going to die. This is a kind of certainty. I mean, many people live as if they're not going to, particularly when they're young. But we have a kind of abstract understanding of our own finitude. So we know that we're not gods. We know that we're not going to live forever. Okay, within the horizon of that reality, that sort of definite possibility, if you like, the choices that we make or we can make, and we're always in a situation, Sartre says, it's not pure freedom. We never have the freedom to do anything, right? We can't defy certain laws of physics. We can't choose to do things that are impossible. But within the situation, within the conditions of the context, sometimes we are presented with dilemmas, quite often, in fact. Some of them are very small, some of them are larger. And it is those choices, if you like, that generate meaning within the context of the finitude of our own lives. Sartre, he gets this a lot from Kierkegaard and Heidegger. We'll talk about the project, the way we project ourselves into the future. It's almost like, so for example, if you take up a degree, it's almost like saying, in 3 years' time, I will have been the kind of person who did a philosophy degree. Or I'm taking on this theatre company. I want this is a project that gives meaning to my life and also to my relationships and my friendships. And through these projects and through these decisions, we generate our character. But I think you're right to say that there is a lot of emphasis placed on the individual. And this is a huge struggle within Sartre's philosophy itself, which is the tension between a seemingly kind of individualistic Cartesian mind or consciousness and other people. And it's a big problem if you're into politics, right? Because politics is a collective endeavor. Generally on the left, as Sartre was, thinking about class or a revolution or a movement or a group or a party, there has to be some sense of a kind of collective project. And so his later work starts to move in the critique of dialectical reason and others into thinking about how can we think as a group? What does it mean to think together rather than in this very individualistic way? And but we really do live in the era of individualism. The post-war contract that we all experience as liberal subjects is the primacy of individual desire, which has its downsides, let's say.
What does it seems to me this is a philosophical movement that has produced quite a lot of art, right? There's quite a, Sartre wrote quite a few plays, as well as novels, and obviously there's Camus and everything. Does it have a sort of official attitude to art, or does it see art as a vehicle for expressing its philosophy?
Yeah, I think you're right. I think because of its emphasis on the everyday and because of its emphasis on the kind of experiences that we often have, like undecidability or even a kind of vertiginous feeling in the face of our own freedom, let's say, or the kind of uncertainties we might confront in a relationship. Do I want to marry this person? Should I decide to have a family? And Sartre makes the point that even to not choose is to choose, for example. So passivity is also a choice. So everything is this kind of framed in this way of having to choose, if you like, even when we think we're not choosing, and therefore everyone is kind of
So everything
responsible.
is, yeah, which is a very, it's a
And
very
this,
dramatic thing inherently, isn't it? Because everyone is
Well,
therefore
exactly. So I
always
was
an
going to
active
say,
subject. Yeah.
exactly. So to stage all of these things in a dramatic or literary way is quite obvious in a way. And I think actually, if you
Yeah,
read
yeah, yeah.
Nausea, it really stands up. Like Sartre's novel is actually pretty good, and it really does
Mm,
kind of
mm,
depict very well these sorts of quotidian and banal, but also incredibly strange encounters that we often have with
mm.
nature. With the revelation of being. So this idea that often we're sort of overwhelmed by the world itself and simply our own experience of experiencing. And that's before we even get to encounters with others and the way in which others devastate us potentially, or we have
Yeah.
baffling relationships or complex relationships.
one of the thoughts that was occurring to me when I was sort of reading some of Sartre in preparation for this was how does he account for sort of the meaning that comes to you, the confrontation of meaning from elsewhere. So people come into your lives and things seem to happen in life, and they do seem to happen in life where you think things, it feels like something's happening for a reason. There's a very odd, is does coincidence exist, or is it all sort of, it's hard to know, isn't it? But you have those odd moments when people just walk into your life, or you suddenly turn around and your ex-girlfriend's there, or whatever it is. And I suppose when I was sort of thinking about some of the Sartre's thoughts and writings, when I was looking at it, I was wondering like how he accounts for like that, like the outside. So his kind of thing is like you have this kind of, you make this choice, and there's a complete, you have to be completely authentic in your choice, and that's the kind of, that seemed to be like the drive he was kind of encouraging. And in the play No Exit, I think he really is exploring this, and maybe we'll get to that in a bit. But what I wasn't quite sure when I was sort of thinking about this stuff was, what's he wanting everyone to do? Is he wanting everyone to make authentic choices and be like completely in line with full choice? But how does he account for all these outside experiences that are coming to us? There surely seems to be, there's all these other things going on around us.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think
Makes
this
sense.
experience of contingency, of randomness, is how things are, right? Like, we don't choose the world. The world doesn't appear to us on the basis of us giving it to ourselves, right? We're not the ground of the world, right? And strange things happen all the time that we are not responsible for. So again, it's this idea of the kind of situation or the condition in which we can make meaning, if you like. And we often ascribe meaning to things that are random and contingent as well. Like you're saying, like the re-encounter with an ex or something seems meaningful and fated, and we give meaning to it by ascribing to it a certain inevitability, because otherwise the world is just too contingent, right? Like, it's too chaotic, it's too meaningless, which is one way of understanding it, but it's a very kind of I don't know, chaos pilled way of seeing the world. But I wanted to pick up on this word you used, which was authentic, which is precisely, one never knows, right, necessarily the outcome of one's choices. But if one knows that one is making a choice, then one is at least deciding in a way that is more authentic. You're not lying to yourself. We also can't, however, escape the condition of lying to ourselves. Like, we constantly delude ourselves. For example, the idea of fate. We think this was ordained, this was meant to be, because it's a lovely story, for example. Or we think that we should do a particular thing because our family want us to, or because our church wants us to. I mean, maybe less the church for more people these days. But all of those things are kind of external justifications for a choice that we're actually making ourselves, but we're kind of disavowing our freedom when we ascribe our choice to external meaning, right? So there's nothing potentially stopping anyone just getting up and walking away, for example, from a situation, right? But we choose to stay, right? So staying is also a choice, for example. But
Yeah.
it's authenticity. So basically, for Sartre and Heidegger and others, the idea would be something like nobody can tell you what to do, and precisely it's those moral systems that have tried to tell people what to do that are the problem, right? Because if people are running around saying you must do this in order to lead a good life or to be happy, then they're that's bad faith, right? People are not authentically choosing it themselves. They're simply going along with the they or the herd or the crowd, and all of the philosophers are very critical of this idea of the crowd or what's popular or what's trendy. It's easy to go with the flow. But rather, if you understand that you are making a choice, even if you have no idea what the choice will result in, and maybe it will have terrible outcomes, as many choices do, as we all know.
Yeah.
Then you at least are resolute. For example, it's a very Heideggerian word. You are resolved. You have understood that your capacity to be free is being exercised in your decision, and that is living more authentically.
But I say that to young actors and to myself is like fail on your own terms. I think being an actor is so difficult because you're constantly getting rejected all the time, and at least having the dignity to sort of fail on your own terms is what's the Heideggerian way? Resolute? Did you say?
Yeah. So sort of to be resolute is to kind of understand one's own capacity to decide, which is what an experience of freedom is. But we have the other important thing for Sartre and the existentialists is this idea of mood, because obviously we're not like an analytic robot. We're not always in the same neutral mode, if you see what I mean. Sometimes we're anxious, sometimes we're sleepless, sometimes we're depressed, sometimes we're excited. Do you know what I mean? And what is a philosophy that can take account of mood, right? This is the question that Kierkegaard asks originally. So all of these moods, Heidegger and Sartre and others would say, actually reveal something to us. So when we're bored, we have an experience of our own radical openness to the world, the fact that we could do all kinds of things. And this is what boredom is. Anxiety is a fear of the future because we haven't really decided what it is that we're going to do. So all of these moods are in and of themselves philosophical. Yeah, or have a philosophical meaning. And I think this point about failure is absolutely central to the existentialist project. So de Beauvoir, who's obviously writing in this mode as well, says that freedom ultimately is the freedom to fail. Like, that's what freedom is. That's what it's not the freedom to succeed. And she says it's only in the 20th century, really, that women as a group, for example, have this experience for the first time, and it is the freedom to fail. It's the freedom to fail without structure, without men, without family, without blah 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 blah. And this is what it means, right? This is actually what freedom is. It's not saying you will fail, but it's saying it contains, freedom contains within it the possibility of failure, right? Which is often why we feel this vertiginous, euphoric, anxious feeling when we're making a kind of big decision.
Yeah. Just I've never thought of this before, but I'm just hearing you speak, I'm so struck by the overlaps with the dramatic form, dramatic writing, and acting as well. You're taught, if you go to writing classes, you are taught like drama is decision. So every scene has a conflicting objectives. They will escalate to a certain extent, and then one character will have to make a decision. And then you follow the energy from that decision is transmitted into the next scene, Ultimately, every character in a dramatic situation discovers that they can make the choice, and makes the choice, and what happens will happen. And then also as an actor as well, there's lots of different schools of acting, obviously, but some of the ones that I'm most interested in kind of teach that there is no sort of essence to you as a person. You are just a succession of choices and a succession of actions and behaviors, and that the combination of different choices and actions results in the character.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's interesting. There are kind of caveats that are put in by Simone de Beauvoir and Frantz Fanon, who are both working in this tradition, when they say, well, actually, yes, of course, we are our capacity to be free. We're condemned to be free. We all have this. That's what it is to be human. But at the same time, there are kind of restrictions, different restrictions on freedom for different groups of people, right? So if you're perceived to be a woman or perceived to be a black man in France at that time, Frantz Fanon talks about moving from Martinique to Paris, your freedom is kind of constrained in some ways from the outside, right? So of course you can decide always how you feel. So think of like a hostage situation, right? Like somebody is chained to a radiator. Objectively, we would say that this person isn't free. They're literally a prisoner, right? Or a hostage. But the person and people, and this is actually borne out, like if you listen to the experiences of people who've been held hostage, you can decide how you feel about the situation, right? You can sing a song, you can decide to act free, you can decide to embrace what you have, what little you have, right? Even in the most kind of abject situation. I think Kanye West actually went to a very existentialist extreme when he made this controversial claim that black people chose to be slaves, which is a very bold thing to claim, right? But from an existentialist point of view, you can see kind of what he meant, right? In the sense that one adopts a role in relation to the perceptions and indeed the behavior and the treatment of others, no matter how extreme it is, right? Or especially when it's very extreme. Like it's easy to say, I'm the victim, right, in this situation. And of course, we would say, yeah, of course, like in some situations, someone is being oppressed. If someone is murdered, they are literally a victim, right? They have no possibility of experiencing consciousness anymore. But we might say, insofar as people are still alive, they do have the choice to decide how to respond to their situation, no matter how abject, brutal, and trapped it is, right? And this is an interesting thing. If you push existentialism all the way to its limits, how far can we actually extend this idea of choice? If it is something absolutely fundamental to who we are as human beings, then even in the most trapped situations, we do still have a choice. I think No Exit obviously stages a trapped situation, right? It's a very claustrophobic. It's like being in a lift. Imagine if you were a lift that broke down and you were trapped with random strangers. That's the kind of premise,
You know this in Aristotle's Poetics. He talks about like character. I think it's like ethos and mythos. So like the ethos, or basically, effectively, what he's saying, I think, is like character and the story that happens to the character. Okay, and like how, as an audience, we relate to that. We sort of, and then he talks about the pathos, or the relationship where you pity the character, right? Watching the character on stage or in a film, you pity them, and then all of a sudden you have this moment when you realize it could be you, and then you sort of fear for them, and that relationship happens. So you suddenly sort of start to see yourself in the story with them, and maybe the story is you, and then you watch the kind of the story happen to the character, and they are making their choices in that story dependent upon the story that's happening to them or being thrust upon them. And this is sort of coming a little bit back to the thing I was saying earlier about like what is happening to us and how much of that is ordained from somewhere else.
For the existentialists, I mean, to be consistent, and I think Sartre is, there can be no fate and there's no unconscious either, right? So he kind of takes aim at Freud as well, because the objects that we have before us in our consciousness, desires, thoughts, feelings, fantasies, whatever, are intentional objects, right? They're things that we think. It's very complicated how to explain this, but there can't be any recourse to fate or the unconscious or character in the sense of destiny for an existentialist, because even to decide, let's say, that one is driven by forces that one can't understand is a choice, right? And also an excuse. And I think this is... Huh?
How is that a choice, Neil?
Because if you're saying I accept my destiny, or I accept my fate, or I'm like this because, this is who I am, you've made a choice to decide that that's the meaning you're going to give to your life, right? And so the question really becomes, and I think this is in No Exit, is this question of responsibility. Like, for what do we take responsibility in our lives? Like, for what choices have we lied about? What choices have we pretended we haven't made? right? And that we can't really accept. It's very difficult for everybody, and this is the really interesting one of the interesting things, like to confront oneself and every decision that you've ever made. And most of them are stupid. Most of them had bad outcomes, or a lot of them did. And, Nietzsche has this provocation of the night with the demon. What if a demon came to you in your darkest night and said, everything you've ever said and done and felt and thought, and all of the bad times, all of the stupid things, all of the shameful things, what if you had to live that over and over and over again, and you couldn't change any of it? You couldn't make any different decisions. Would you be able to say yes? Would you be able to affirm your life, right? And this is the idea of the eternal recurrence, very great provocation in Nietzsche. It's an interesting thought experiment to see whether one can affirm, or especially the most stupid things that we've all done. It's a challenge to see how strong you are, actually, mentally and existentially. But it's often, I think it's very interesting. Sometimes we all do this, I'm sure. We relive a conversation or a situation where things have gone a bit wrong, and we think, what if I'd said this? What if I'd done that? What if I'd known that? And we relive it.
Yeah.
And then often we end up making the same choice in the reliving. I don't know. Hopefully it's not just me. But you end up thinking, no, but I would have gotten angry at that point anyway. And
For
all
me,
you
it's
can
I
do
say
in a way
things
is
that
sort of...
I didn't say in the moment.
Right. Yes.
You
Yeah, the choices we didn't make. But I think, but we all are necessarily going to lie to ourselves, right? We all lie to others. We all are inauthentic. We all seek to deny our freedom, because living in the full glare of freedom constantly is too much. It's very, very painful, right? If we thought that everything we ever did and every choice we'd ever made was us, and we're responsible for all of it, that is tough, right?
So is he is he arguing he believes in complete and utter free will then?
Well, like I say, in context, right? So we can't simply
In
say,
context.
I'm free to, I don't know, climb a mountain in 20 seconds, right? Like, you can't defy certain laws, right? And there are certain things they talk about facticity, right? There are certain things you can't choose. Let's be clear. So you can't choose when you're born, who your parents are, right? The country where you're born, right? Things like this, right? So we enter into the world with a certain set of facts, if you like. Of course, we can decide how we feel about those facts. We could lie about them. We could pretend we were adopted. We could love our parents. We could hate them. We could be in touch. We could be apart from them. We could lie about our age. We could lie about our nationality. We could say we were a different sex. We could do all kinds of things if we want. But these are still, how to put it, choices that we make within a situation, which we don't choose. So there are certain things we don't choose, but we always choose how we relate to them. I mean, my psychoanalyst always said, you can't change the past, you can only change how you feel about it.
If you were to
it's
choose
not
to lie and pretend... Sorry, if you were to choose to lie and pretend that you were adopted, would that be an authentic choice to make? As in,
if
what's the criteria for a choice being authentic?
I mean, an authentic choice is one in which you know it's a choice. At base, right? It's something like you are in full awareness of the fact that you are making this choice to lie.
Yes, that's good, isn't it? Yeah. But it's good for us, Nina, because it's like to sort of kind of have your knowledge and to sort of mine it and kind of explore this with you is so wonderful. I was thinking about like Julius Caesar, crossing the Rubicon. I was sort of thinking about those moments in history where like usually a great man is like, right, I'm going to do it. We're crossing the river, we're going, and we're in. And then they were at war with Rome, or when Hitler, they decide to invade Poland, or those moments and that kind of what that must take. And you see it actually, I think it was at Bolsonaro when there was all this sort of there was a moment after the election when he lost, when there was all these riots, and then he was eating KFC. Have you seen this picture?
No, it's very Trumpian.
No, but
How amazing.
But no, but the sort of the kind of point is that that when he could have made some big decision to go for something big and kind of join, he actually just went to KFC. And that's what that's what some people say that picture represents, is not making the big decision when you're like, right, I'm going to cross the Rubicon, I'm going to war. It's like, I'm going KFC.
But even that small decision is a decision, right? Like, it's very interesting. I mean, Sartre at one point in the essay on existentialism as humanism, he talks about deciding between two pastries. Is this an existential dilemma if I choose the chocolate croissant or the almond croissant?
It's a tough choice.
But yeah, should we get on to the play itself? So No Exit comes in 1944. So Sartre is writing it during World War II. For anyone who doesn't know, the setup for the play, or the play begins, it's all in one room. And so it's quite a nice, like, living room, basically. And this middle-aged guy, Garçon, is brought into the room by a valet, who in our reading was played by me. And the valet is showing Garçon this place where he is now seems to be staying and living forever. And then slowly more people are brought in, two other people, Estelle and Inez, and they're trying to work out where they are and why they are there, and they realise that they're dead, and they realise that this is an afterlife, which they come to think is hell. They come to believe, Inez actually realises it, first of all, that they have been placed, three people, in this room for eternity to torture each other. And they have all made significant choices in their life, tragic choices, bad choices. And the play it's a wonderful play. It's not too long. It's probably about an hour. And during the course of the play, these three people are wrestling with each other to extract the information of what they've done from each other, and to... they're sort of wrestling each other into being what the other person wants them to be, and that causes them to torture each other, basically. So why has Sartre chosen this specific, like, setting of hell and these three people trapped together to test his ideas?
Yeah, so I think ultimately, I mean, obviously we know that Sartre is an atheist, so perhaps hell is a strange place to set this play. But I think ultimately one of the questions that's posed by the play is actually, is this life hell, right? Is it actually the afterlife? Or is it in fact this life? Obviously, the play features the very famous or infamous line, hell is other people, which people often misascribe to Sartre in that classic way where people take a line from somebody's novel or play and then claim that it sums up the author's view. I don't think this is a correct thing to do, of course, but if we take that line, hell is other people, it's a very interesting provocation to go back to this idea of choice and others. I mean, we may have all kinds of desires. We may desire somebody, but it does matter if they desire us back. And one of the things that the play explores is this kind of asymmetry that we often encounter in friendship, in life, in romantic relationships, where there is a mismatch between what we want and what the other person wants or doesn't want. And we're sort of constantly in this sort of confrontation with the other in their otherness, which often appears to us as kind of bizarre and separate. And I think, one of the issues with contemporary life actually is an increasing perhaps inability to want to deal with the otherness of others. In their disagreement, in their reality, in their embodiment. It's far easier to sort of retreat in bad faith to virtual relationships and so on. But anyway, that's a kind of another dimension. Let's say we're in a situation we didn't choose. We are confronted with others, with strangers we don't know. We also have to decide how to comport ourselves. We have to decide how to relate to the other people. We don't know why we're there. I mean, all of these things are very metaphorical for our own existence. We're thrown into the world, as Heidegger would say. As I say, we didn't choose various things about our lives. We can only choose how we understand them or live with them. And then I suppose it's one of the other questions that's posed in the philosophy and also very well in the play is the idea that how our choices affect other people, right? So Sartre at various points flirts with the idea that every time we choose, we're choosing on behalf of all of humanity, right? So if we lie, we're sort of saying that everybody can lie or that all of humanity is lying, right? Which again puts a massive burden on us, if you like. And we might start to think that honesty really is the best policy, because actually life becomes extremely complicated the more we lie, and especially if we lie to ourselves, which is a bit confusing, because how can we lie to ourselves? Don't we have sort of complete transparency, in the Sartrean model, to our own desires and so on? If there's no unconscious, where are these thoughts coming from? But I think he somehow kind of gets around this sort of dual consciousness idea, by saying that we necessarily practice a form of bad faith, and almost we kind of have to, like social life, because of its complexity and difficulty. And this is one of the great tensions of our age, and probably every age, is the extent to which we can be honest all the time, and actually whether it is a good idea. And having taken precisely one Meisner workshop with you guys, which was absolutely fantastic, I strongly recommend it to everybody. That question of how much we self-censor and how much we permit ourselves to speak, even within this very kind of permissive framework in which people are being encouraged to say what they see and so on, is really striking. It's a really interesting experience, and I definitely didn't say certain things, even though I regard myself as whatever, honest and trying to be straightforward. And it really revealed to me, I think, how much we do self-censor, and how much we perhaps play certain social games. And when we're not sure of the rules, right, which we're never really sure of the rules, then people are going to err on the side of caution. They're going to be extremely engaging from various forms of trepidation and sort of harm aversion, and all of the things I think we've seen in the arts and more broadly. I think the existentialist moment, and in this play, we're still in a social world in which there is a kind of directness, there is a direct confrontation with the other, desire for the other, antipathy towards the other, kind of horrible revelation of the other. They have no choice, in a sense, right? The choice they have is only how to respond in the situation, right? Which is otherwise highly artificial.
Yeah, it's interesting because within the play there's it is a bit like a sort of three-way Meisner class in some ways, sort of three-way Meisner session, because, and this is what you're saying, if you seem to be saying that Sartre, it doesn't matter that this is hell, like this is life, this is like everyday life as far as Sartre is concerned. That's the picture that he's giving to us. And in those interactions, like, you always have an image of yourself that you're trying to project into the world, and then you have an image of the other person that you're sort of negotiating as well. And yeah, it's true, I sort of find that in Meisner as well, that sometimes you censor yourself because you're like, well, I don't want to like puncture the other person's image that they have of themselves. Like, I don't really want to do that. Like, that would be quite a catastrophic thing to do potentially. And for me anyway, when I'm doing Meisner, sometimes I feel like if I puncture their image of themselves, that's gonna, the all bets are off then, and they're gonna feel totally vindicated to like come after and puncture my image of myself. And then what happens? Then we'd be like totally sort of naked. And this seems to happen in the play. They puncture each other's images of themselves, and by the end of the play they are quite naked, really. And this is what I couldn't work out when we were working on the play. Have they achieved something by the end? They all seem to have sort of come clean.
Yeah,
and then
they
the
have.
famous
They
last
have.
line, well, let's crack on. But have they achieved something, or are they stuck just in that state forever?
Well, then they say at the end of the play, we might as well get on with it, right?
Yeah.
So I feel like they
Get
do
on with
achieve
what?
something in. Well, I mean,
But
yeah.
get on with torturing each other, or get on with something else.
Well, ultimately, like there's flaws to the sort of there's an edge to the logic, because he's just set this up here, and you don't. It's just in this kind of he's created this space, hasn't he, where you can
Yeah.
he can explore these ideas, but to continue it, it's like, well, it's hard to know where that would continue to. What I got from the play, right, in terms of loads, I got loads of stuff from it, but one of the things it made me think about was this idea in life, right, that we live in our own thoughts in other people's perceptions of us at all times, right? So we're always thinking about what everyone else thinks about us. Or the obvious one is when you're like people are hungover, they're like, oh, what was I saying last night? And everyone's at home saying how awful of a person I am, or whatever, all that sort of stuff. So we sort of spend most of our life
It's
actually
probably true.
Yeah, possibly. We spend most of our life almost existing in the thoughts of others. We experiment existing, thinking about the perceptions of others of who we might be, right? And that for me, I feel like there's a hell there, right? It's a sort of state of hell. Like we sort of live constantly at the mercy of this problem, and I think that what Sartre was saying in the play was that if we can if we speak authentically and we speak from the most authentic place of who we are, we will be released from that hell. And all the characters cannot be released until they confront that truth of who they actually are. And particularly Estelle and Garçon, as they I think it's what's she called, the older the other female character
Inez.
in the play,
Inez?
Inez. She gets it early on, right? She sort of susses this is the test here, right? And then she kind of pushes the other two for ages. There's all sorts of other stuff going on, but Garçon is the one, he keeps trying to get away from this, and Sartre just doesn't let them get away from it. And you will not be free until you speak what is authentic. And once you've done that, you are free. And then the problem becomes, well, let's get on with it. And then that, well, getting on with it, that is then a whole other question, right? But I think that was for me. That was the profound sort of lesson I took from this play, and I know that when I'm thinking of other people's perceptions of me in life, I'm like, well, if I can just speak honestly, as honest as I can, there is a profound freedom there, and so yeah, I'm sort of grateful to Sartre for that. Yeah, does that make sense to you too? What I'm saying?
Absolutely. No, and I think this kind of Hall of Mirrors effect, like the thought of the other, who are we, in terms of how we're perceived by others, is exactly how social life proceeds, right? And in all of its kind of paradoxes. And I think at that time also you have people like Jacques Lacan who are trying to think about how desire functions, and he famously says desire is the desire of the other, as in we ourselves feel desire when we believe that we are being desired, right? But this is a very recursive model of desire. It's not saying we know what it is that we want. And then the other great phrase would be something like, love is giving something you don't have to someone who doesn't want it, right? So everything proceeds on the basis of a kind of lack or a kind of absence. Like, even if we think, oh, I really want this person, and let's say they kind of agree as, okay, fine, yes, let's do it. Then you might feel like you want to back off, right? Because actually getting what you want isn't what you want. And all of these kind of paradoxes that we constantly confront with the other. But I think you're right, Morgan, that it's this question of what happens after this revelation of the capacity to choose, and the fact that they all kind of reach this point where they can't kill themselves because they're already dead, right? So that's not an option. They realize that they are stuck in a kind of eternity, and that everything they sort of do and have done in their lives is done, as it were, and they have to live with those choices, and they have to accept that those were choices. And there is a sense in which moving forward, we don't know where to, and we're still condemned to be free. Again, this is like this paradox, it's not like we can say for once and for all, okay, I've been honest, I'm now authentic, right? Like, oh, I've tidied my life. Although it is very tempting to think that, especially when one has maybe had a breakdown or one has had a crisis. I'm starting again. I mean, yes, that's true, but you also have to live with everything that's already happened, all the choices you've already made. Like even seeking to disavow those would be a kind of bad faith, right? You are in this situation through a whole combination of the choices that you've made at every moment. It's very interesting if we think about something like addiction. To put it in an existentialist way, it's like saying every time you pick up, every time you smoke, every time you drink, every time you ingest something, you are making a choice, right? This gives a lie to another model of addiction, which would say that people are at the mercy of a compulsion. Again, this poses a great question to us. But yeah, I mean, I think this play is very effective. It was very successful when it came out. Like, it was very immediately successful, which is not always the case with with new plays, as I'm sure you know. And Sartre very, very readily admitted that this was a kind of theatrical version of the ideas that he was already exploring in his philosophy work. And he was particularly good at doing that. Like, he's one of the few people who could move between genres and tones and styles very well.
And he writes incredible.
almost unique,
Incredible
really.
dialogue.
Both of you seem to take the ending of the play as being maybe a bit more positive than I took it. And I've been thinking about this thing that philosophers, when they or thinkers, when they write drama and literature, it often like undermines their stated philosophy. And I kind of saw this as another example of that. I mean, we found it a little bit with Goethe, with Faust. He was sort of undermining his own life with the character of Faust. I felt in some interpretations, and I sort of felt a little bit that Sartre was doing that, was actually showing, almost unconsciously showing that having the idea that you can choose and be responsible for your choices is not as liberating as he wanted it to be in the play.
I don't necessarily read the ending as positive. I think it's just profoundly open-ended. I mean, it's, like the very last direction, they slump onto their respective sofas, a long silence, their laughter dies away and they gaze at each other. Garcon, well, let's get on with it. Like, there's nothing kind of definitive about that. I mean, the revelation, they're still trapped in hell together for all eternity. I mean, it's just that their circumstances perhaps have become clearer to them, but it doesn't, they're still condemned to be free in that sense that nothing about their choices is now determined, if you see what I mean, right? They may have come to some, less delusional understanding of the situation and their possible relations to each other, but it doesn't mean that it's all like fun and games. Right, like
they're not liberated.
No,
so when
we never are.
No,
right, so
and
there's
then
no liberation in existentialism.
Yeah, and then my question is like, this is my kind of problem. I'm like, well, then, okay, yes, Sartre, yes, we're being really authentic. What now? Like, let's just get on with it. But it's like, where to? Like, what's the bigger? Is there like God? Is there final judgment? Are we transcendent spirits? Are we going to go somewhere else? And actually, maybe these authentic choices we're making do matter for some bigger reason. And like, yeah, you can just live being authentic all the time, which is probably a very healthy way to be most of the time. But I was always a bit like yearning for the bigger stuff, I was like, well, yeah, but for what purpose?
Right,
like,
if you authentically choose, knowing that you've chosen, for example, to be a Christian, right, this is a stronger basis upon which to establish your faith, right? The point would be, if you simply go along with what is traditional or expected, or because you're worried about what other people might think, right? My parents would be upset if I stopped being religious, or if I started being religious, probably more likely these days. You are not making an authentic choice. If you choose to believe in God, if you choose to be a Christian and go to church, this is an authentic choice. So it's not the content, it's nothing to do with the content of the decision, if you see what I mean. Like, one can choose almost anything, right? One, within context, within your possibility, financial, existential, physical. But it's the way in which you make that choice. Sartre cannot tell anybody what to do, right? Like, the entire point of his system would not be to propose a new moral code or a new religion or a new ethics. It's simply to alert people to the fact that they are making a choice, even when they think they're not. And almost to kind of give them the opportunity, I suppose, to understand upon what basis we are giving ourselves meaning. And if meaning to you is becoming a Christian, then that's your meaning, right? You've chosen it.
So when, like, hell is other people, just to kind of, I always think that people sort of think of that as being like, I fucking hate everyone. There's something quite satisfying about that. Yeah, just hate everyone. Hell is other people. There's something nice about the general. But I think that's maybe the more like I used to say that kind of thing. I remember just saying sometimes like, hell is other people. If you're just bitching about other people, you just use that little phrase. But I feel like actually there's a much. So I that's why I sort of made sense of it being like, actually, if you live in the perceptions of others and you're not authentic, that is a type of hell. And I've felt that's probably more towards what Sartre's getting at with this piece.
Yeah, I mean, one of the major implications of that phrase is that you are also other people to other people, right? So you are also hell to other people, if you see what I mean. Like, it's not just your experience of others, it's others' experience of you. You know.
So, Nina, can I ask you a lofty Christian question?
Mm.
You know the thing about like the word. I think Sebastian Milbank, when he was at the event, got up and said something to do with something. It was so incredible what he said that I couldn't quite keep up with it. But it was something. There was some interesting kind of exploration of this idea of the divine logos, the divine word. You know, the word being the kind of the truest thing in the world. If you're true to the word, and the word almost being like God. Is there a relation between Sartre's sense of that authenticity of the word and that divine logos, the divine word? Is he, because what we found in some of our other, what you find often is that like Christian ideas sort of mutate or replicate or morph into something else in a new world of philosophy or a new kind of political movement. Is there any, do you think there's interesting links between that, between the divine word and this idea of being authentic with your word?
I think, you know, we have lived in the West in a Christian society for many, like it's basically very difficult to get out of using religious language. Even Sartre setting this in hell metaphorically, when he's supposed to be an atheist, or religious language of you know, sin and redemption and confession, right? All of these things are very, very deeply embedded, even if we think we're personally atheistic, or even if we live in a liberal secular society. Our inheritance is Christian, right? There's absolutely no way around it. I mean, human rights are based on Christian ideas of the value of the person, notions of universality and equality. These all come out of Christianity. Right, so it's impossible to create an entirely new language that doesn't owe anything to that inheritance.
Sartre feels kind of more Socratic in a way, like the examined life is sort of what you're saying. Like, as long as you examine your life, everything is fine, everything is permitted, everything is fine, but as long as you've rationalized it to some extent. I liked when we were researching about this play that Sartre had very deliberately kept all the characters equal, because he knew what actors were like and that they were likely to get jealous and annoyed with each other if one of them had a bigger role. That was obviously someone Sartre deep understanding of the human psyche.
Didn't Camus play Garcin in the first production of it?
There is something
that
about
right?
that. Yes, that's right.
Wasn't he supposed to but didn't, or something like that?
Yeah, I don't think he
Yeah, there
actually
was
did.
something.
He wanted Camus to play Garcin and also to direct. But I think Camus
Right.
and one of the actresses had an affair that went wrong. I mean, it's all very Parisian.
What's quite inspiring about it as well is that he wrote it because he knew that because it was in during World War II, he had limited resources and like limited settings, right? So you have to like come up with a play that can only be done in a room with a certain amount of actors, and then actually it's kind of lovely that those restrictions allowed him to create one. I think is one of my favorite plays of all time, actually, this play. And that was kind of, it's nice to think that, isn't it, that actually sometimes we feel that within the restrictions there are potential opportunities to create really interesting things.
I mean, he wanted to explore these ideas that he had in dramatic form, and did it in a where you need like no money, no resources. You can get actors, and it works. Like even as a reading, it works dramatically. That's really inspiring, kind of for what we're doing as well. And we're going to launch this sort of new writing project and competition. And yeah, I just find that really inspiring that you can explore these really profound ideas in very specific, like human situations with no resources, just with dialogue and with psychological war and wrestling going on between people.
And then what's quite interesting with the Soviet era, with like Mayakovsky and stuff, there's probably like situations where they're like, right, the state, they'll give you so much money. There's one play, I think they have 8,000 actors in it, in the Soviet era, but they'll give you so much money, but you have to make it, there has to be a certain type of play for a certain type of reason. And like, that's interesting, isn't it? The sort of the financial pressure on creatives to toe a certain line, and people know that I won't get my funding unless I say the right thing or do the, all that sort of stuff is interesting.
Well, actually, just
Yeah.
slightly related to that, I remember on the night of the reading, I actually asked you, Nina, and you slightly slapped me down, I'm sure correctly, but I said that I was always under the impression that Sartre viewed art as very politically instrumental, and that because of his left-wing politics, like he believed that art should be political over aesthetic. That was always just what I'd picked up or understood. And I think you said that wasn't quite correct, because I was going to blame Sartre for all the current problems in the arts, basically.
I see. Perhaps later the political question becomes more vexing for him. And I mean, but he even then he uses plays to deal with, questions of questions of betrayal, questions of loyalty, question of comradeship, question of like how far would you go for the revolution and so on. In the idea of like dirty hands, for example, and like complicity. So I think even in the sort of more political phase, which we're not yet at, I mean, he kind of, in the 40s, he's still dealing, I would say, first and foremost, with these philosophical questions and as they are experienced, which is why the dramatic and literary fields are so kind of appropriate for him. I mean, he says of being a nothingness that my big book was told in the form of short non-philosophical tales, as in like he regarded as his plays like No Exit and others and Nausea as explorations of his philosophy. And I think while there are political dimensions in No Exit, obviously the whole kind of Garcin character is a political figure. It's not presenting a political message straightforwardly, right? Like it's not, there's no one's being bashed over the head, I think, with this is the right way to think about the revolution. You know what I mean? It's not propaganda, because what would it be propaganda for, right? Or who? And in many ways, Sartre was actually attacked by Marxists over many decades for being an individualistic thinker, for being bourgeois, which he was, for being, too solipsistic and so on and so forth, right? Because bourgeois individualism is, if you like, the enemy, right? for a certain mindset.
Yes. So, well, I feel like we've covered No Exit and Exit completely. And Nina, you've given us so much wonderful bits of knowledge from your incredible mind. Just wanted to say a massive thank you, Nina, for talking to us and giving us your wonderful wisdom. Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you both.
We are The Base Creates. Thank you very much for listening. Please follow us on Instagram, X, or find us at www.thebasecreates.co.uk. We are hosting regular events and we'll be putting on a play soon, and we are launching our new writing competition, the Agon. And so we're encouraging new writers to come forward and get in touch with us, and that will be launching soon. We've also got classes on. We've got Meisner classes. We're going to be launching writing classes and movement classes. So please come and join us. We're looking for all sorts of people, philosophers, actors, writers, directors, or anyone. We want people to come forth and get involved with us, and we want to kind of re-engage with a daring, dramatic spirit.